His Last Bow, 1917, Episode 1, Wisteria Lodge. Welcome back, fellow detectives. After witnessing the dark moral complexities of the Valley of Fear and Holmes's intellectual war with Professor Moriarty, you might think you've seen the full range of his career, but today we enter a new chapter, the later years of the great detective. When his fame is established, his methods are refined, and his cases grow stranger and more international in scope. Have you ever accepted what seemed like a simple missing person case, only to discover it connects to political intrigue, murder, and exotic mysteries that span continents? Prepare yourself for a tale that begins with a worried friend and ends with revelations about voodoo, diplomatic immunity, and the limits of British justice. Picture yourself on a March morning in 1892 at 221B Baker Street. Holmes is in an excellent mood, having just completed 3 cases in rapid succession. Watson notes with satisfaction that his friend seems more balanced than during the intense Moriarty period, still brilliant but with less of that feverish obsession that characterized their earlier confrontations. Watson, Holmes announces over breakfast, we have a visitor arriving shortly, a Mr. John Scott Eccles, a gentleman of independent means from Popham House in Lee. His telegram suggests extreme agitation and hints at some business involving a foreigner and a mysterious disappearance. Watson raises an eyebrow. How do you know his address and social status from a telegram requesting an appointment? Holmes smiles. The telegram was sent from Lee. And the stationery, yes, Watson, even telegrams have distinctive paper, bears the watermark of an expensive brand used by wealthy households. His phrasing is educated but slightly pompous, suggesting old money rather than new, elementary deductions that provide context before we even meet the man. Can you appreciate the subtle skill here, detective? Holmes isn't just observing facts, he's building a psychological profile from the smallest clues, preparing himself to understand not just what happened, but why a man like Eccles would find it disturbing. This preparation is what separates great detectives from merely good ones. Mr. John Scott Eccles arrives precisely on time, and he's exactly as Holmes predicted. A well-dressed gentleman in his 50s, clearly prosperous, deeply conventional, and presently very flustered. He's the type of man who lives by routine and propriety, and something has shaken his orderly world to its foundations. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I'm at my wit's end. Eccles begins without preamble. I've been the victim of the most extraordinary and inexplicable trick. I spent last night as a guest at Wisteria Lodge, and this morning I woke to find the house completely deserted. My host vanished, the servants gone, no explanation whatsoever. It's monstrous. It's incomprehensible. Holmes gestures for him to sit and collect himself. Start from the beginning, Mr. Eccles. How did you come to be a guest at Wisteria Lodge? Eccles takes a deep breath, clearly trying to organize his thoughts. 3 days ago, I made the acquaintance of a foreign gentleman at the Northumberland Hotel, a Spaniard named Don Juan Murillo. Charming fellow, excellent manners, though his English was imperfect. Here's where you should start paying attention, detective. A wealthy foreigner staying at a respectable hotel suddenly befriends a conventional English gentleman and invites him to his country house. Does that strike you as normal behavior? What might Don Murillo have wanted from Eccles? Don Murillo invited me to spend a few days at his residence near Asia, Eccles continues, said he was new to England and wanted to learn about proper English country life. I was flattered. Naturally, it's not every day one is asked to represent English hospitality to a foreign gentleman of quality. I accepted and traveled there yesterday afternoon. Watson asks the obvious question, what was the house like? Was there anything unusual about it? Eccles considers. Wisteria Lodge is a substantial property, though somewhat isolated. Don Murillo lived there with his secretary, a surly fellow named Lopez, and two servants. The house was comfortable, but oddly impersonal. Few personal effects, minimal furniture, as if they'd only recently moved in or planned to leave soon. Holmes leans forward with interest. Describe the evening. What happened after you arrived? Eccles's face shows bewilderment. That's just it. Nothing particularly remarkable happened. We had dinner, discussed various topics. Don Murillo seemed anxious about something, kept looking at his watch, but when I inquired, he said he was expecting an important letter. Around 10 o'clock, he received a note delivered by hand. After reading it, he became even more agitated. He excused himself, Eccles continues, saying he had urgent business to attend to. I went to bed around 11, heard some sounds downstairs, voices, perhaps someone leaving, but thought nothing of it. Country houses make odd noises at night after all. This morning, I woke around 8 to find the entire house deserted, not a soul anywhere, no servants, no Don Murillo, no Lopez, even the horses were gone from the stable. Think about this scenario, detective. Why would someone invite a guest to their home, then disappear in the middle of the night, leaving that guest alone? What purpose could such bizarre behavior serve? Is Eccles the victim here, or perhaps an unwitting pawn in some larger scheme? Holmes asks the crucial question. Mr. Eccles, did you touch anything in the house? Explore the rooms? Search for clues as to where everyone went? Eccles looks offended. Certainly not. That would be improper. I simply gathered my belongings, walked to the nearest village, and came straight to London to consult you. The whole situation is deeply embarrassing, yet what will people think when they learn I was abandoned by my host? Watson notices something. Mr. Eccles, you seem more concerned about social embarrassment than actual danger. Aren't you worried something might have happened to Don Murillo? Eccles hesitates. Well, yes, I suppose. But honestly, Dr. Watson, I'm more concerned about my own reputation. Being associated with such bizarre circumstances could reflect poorly on my social standing. Here's a fascinating insight into human nature. Eccles's primary concern isn't the mystery or potential danger, but how the situation affects his image. This self-absorption will prove significant in understanding why he was chosen for whatever role he's playing. Holmes stands decisively. Mr. Eccles, I believe we should visit Wisteria Lodge immediately. Watson, would you care to join us? This case promises to be more interesting than it first appears. As they prepare to leave, Inspector Baines of the Surrey Constabulary arrives at Baker Street with urgent news. Mr. Holmes, Baines says grimly, I'm here about a murder that occurred last night near Esher. A man's body was found this morning on Oxshott Common, beaten to death with extreme violence. We've reason to believe the victim is connected to Wisteria Lodge, and when we went to investigate, we found the house abandoned, except for one very confused gentleman who'd spent the night there. Eccles turns pale. Murder? Good heavens! You don't think I'm suspected? Baines studies him carefully. That depends, sir. Where exactly were you between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning? Eccles stammers, asleep in my room at Wisteria Lodge. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. This is outrageous. Holmes intervenes smoothly. Inspector Baines, I think we'd all benefit from visiting the scene together. Mr. Eccles has consulted me about the mysterious disappearance of his host, Don Juan Murillo. It appears this case has suddenly become far more serious than a social embarrassment. Baines nods agreement, and the group sets off for Surrey. The journey to Wisteria Lodge takes about an hour by train and carriage. The house sits isolated at the end of a long drive surrounded by overgrown gardens where wisteria vines climb wild across the facade. It's a melancholy place, beautiful in its abandonment, but somehow ominous. Can you feel the atmosphere, detective? This isn't a home, it's a hiding place, temporary shelter for people with secrets to keep. Holmes begins his examination systematically, starting with the guest room where Eccles spent the night. Everything just as you left it, Mr. Eccles? Holmes asks. Eccles confirms. Yes, exactly. I made the bed before leaving. Force of habit, but otherwise untouched. Holmes finds this interesting. You made the bed? That's quite unusual for a guest. Most would leave it for servants. This small detail reveals much about Eccles, a man so concerned with propriety that even in an abandoned house he tidies up after himself. Such a conventional, predictable person would be perfect for creating alibis or providing plausible confusion. Someone planned this very carefully. The dining room shows evidence of last night's meal, dishes not cleared, wine glasses still on the table, a half-smoked cigar in an ashtray. They left in a hurry, Watson observes, but why? What could have frightened them so completely? Holmes examines a note on the table, written in Spanish. The tiger hunts tonight. Leave now or die. Inspector Baines translates. I studied Spanish during a case in Gibraltar. This is a death threat, Mr. Holmes. Don Murillo received warning that someone dangerous was coming for him, and he fled immediately. Holmes nods thoughtfully and left Mr. Eccles behind. Why? Why not wake him and explain the danger? Can you see the significance of this question? If Don Murillo genuinely feared for his life, why abandon a guest to potential danger? Unless Eccles's presence served some purpose that required him to remain in the house, ignorant and available to provide an alibi or distraction. Holmes discovers more evidence in Don Murillo's study, a desk hastily rifled through, papers burned in the fireplace, a safe standing open and empty. They took their valuables and important documents, Holmes notes. This was a planned evacuation, not a panic flight. Don Murillo knew this threat was coming and had prepared for it. But then, Watson asks, why the theatrical note? Why the dramatic midnight escape? Holmes's smile is knowing. Because someone needed to believe the escape was sudden and unplanned. Someone needed to think Don Murillo was frightened and fleeing in terror. But who and why create that impression? Create that. Inspector Baines has been examining the grounds and returns with disturbing news. Mr. Holmes, I've found something in the garden. You should see this. He leads them to an outbuilding where strange items are arranged on a makeshift altar. Chicken bones, candles, symbols painted in what appears to be blood, and a crude doll with pins stuck through it. Voodoo? Watson breathes, recognizing the ritualed paraphernalia from his time in the tropics. Someone's been practicing black magic here. Holmes examines the items with his magnifying glass. Not British voodoo, if such a thing exists. These symbols are Central American, likely from the Caribbean or possibly Central America. Don Murillo and his household brought these practices with them. Think about what this reveals, detective. Don Murillo wasn't just any wealthy foreigner. He came from a place where voodoo is practiced, suggesting Caribbean or Latin American origin. The name Murillo could be Spanish, Cuban, or from any number of countries. And he brought these practices to rural England, hidden away in an isolated house. What was he hiding from? Baines leads them to view the murder victim's body, which has been taken to the local mortuary. The sight is gruesome. a man in his 40s, beaten with savage violence, his face barely recognizable. He wears expensive clothes now soaked in blood, and his hands show signs of defensive wounds. We found him at dawn on Oxshott Common, about 2 miles from Wisteria Lodge, Baines explains. Holmes examines the body minutely. Beaten with a blunt instrument, possibly a club or heavy stick, the pattern of wounds suggests multiple attackers or one attacker striking repeatedly in a frenzy. This wasn't professional murder, this was personal hatred. Someone wanted this man to suffer. He checks the victim's pockets and finds a card. Senor Lopez, secretary to Don Juan Murillo. So the victim is Lopez, Don Murillo's secretary. The surly man Eccles mentioned seeing at dinner. But why kill the secretary? Watson wonders. If someone wanted revenge on Don Murillo, why murder his employee? Holmes's expression is grave. Perhaps because they couldn't reach Don Murillo, or perhaps Lopez wasn't just a secretary, perhaps he was a bodyguard, and he died protecting his employer's escape. Inspector Baines reveals more information. We found a bicycle hidden near the body, expensive model, recently purchased in London. We're tracing the seller now. Also, there were peculiar marks on a tree near the murder scene, symbols carved into the bark, similar to those voodoo signs in the garden. Holmes nods. The murderer marked the location, but for whom? As a warning, a boast, or perhaps a ritual completion. The investigation takes an unexpected turn when a local gamekeeper reports seeing 3 men running across the common around midnight, one being chased by 2 others. The first man was screaming in Spanish, the gamekeeper says. The 2 chasing him were silent, moving like hunters tracking prey. I thought it was poachers and stayed hidden. By the time I reached the spot where I'd seen them, there was only the body. Holmes asks pointed questions. Could you describe the men, their clothing, any distinguishing features? The gamekeeper shakes his head. Too dark, and they moved too fast. But the one being chased wore gentleman's clothes, white shirt that showed in the moonlight. The hunters wore dark clothing, practical for moving unseen, and one carried something long, a club or staff. Can you piece together what happened, detective? Lopez fled from Wisteria Lodge, probably trying to draw pursuers away from Don Murillo's escape. 2 assassins hunted him across the common and beat him to death when they caught him. But who were these assassins, and why did they want Don Murillo dead so badly that they'd kill his secretary in frustrated rage? Holmes returns to Wisteria Lodge with a new theory forming. Inspector, Mr. Eccles was never a guest. He was stage dressing. Don Murillo needed a respectable English gentleman present in the house to provide an innocent explanation for its occupation. When the threat arrived, Murillo fled and left Eccles behind as a distraction or perhaps a decoy. The assassins might have wasted precious time searching the house and questioning Eccles, giving Murillo time to escape. Eccles is outraged. Used? I was used as a decoy? This is monstrous. I demand satisfaction. I'll sue. Holmes cuts him off. Mr. Eccles, you were selected because you're utterly conventional and predictable. Don Murillo knew you'd go straight to the police in the morning, causing confusion and buying him more time. Your social status and obvious innocence make you the perfect alibi. No one would suspect someone like you of being involved in murder and intrigue. Watson asks the key question, but Holmes, who is Don Juan Murillo really? And who wants him dead badly enough to beat his secretary to death? Holmes's answer sets up the deeper mystery. That, Watson, is what we must discover. But I suspect Don Murillo is no ordinary wealthy foreigner. The voodoo practices, the bodyguard secretary, the prepared escape route, the death threats, all suggest a man with a violent past catching up to him. Inspector Baines proves more competent than many police officers Holmes has worked with. Mr. Holmes, I've been making inquiries through diplomatic channels. A Senor Juan Murillo matches the description of a former dictator from Central America, specifically San Pedro. He was overthrown in a revolution 3 years ago and reportedly fled with millions in gold stolen from the national treasury. He's wanted for murder, torture, and mass atrocities. The former dictator is known as the Tiger of San Pedro. Baines continues, his regime was extraordinarily brutal. Thousands were killed, entire villages destroyed, opponents fed to actual tigers he kept as pets. When the revolution succeeded, he escaped just hours before rebel forces stormed his palace. He's been in hiding ever since, with a substantial price on his head. So tell me, Detective, does this change your perspective on the case? Don Murillo isn't an innocent victim. He's a monster fleeing justice. Lopez wasn't just a secretary, but likely a fellow war criminal. And the assassins weren't murderers, but perhaps revolutionaries pursuing the man who destroyed their country. Where do our sympathies lie now? Holmes explores this moral complexity. Inspector, under British law, we must pursue those who committed murder on British soil, regardless of their grievances. But I confess to mixed feelings. If Don Murillo is indeed the Tiger of San Pedro, his pursuers may see themselves as executing justice that international law has failed to provide. Baines nods grimly. Justice or revenge? Mr. Holmes, the line grows blurry. The case takes another turn when a mysterious woman appears at Wisteria Lodge, a beautiful, desperate creature who identifies herself as Miss Burnett, Don Murillo's housekeeper. I stayed hidden when the assassins came, she explains. I saw everything. I can help you find the killers. But Holmes notices inconsistencies in her story, details that don't quite align with the physical evidence. Join me next time as we continue the Wisteria Lodge mystery in our second part, where Holmes will uncover Miss Burnett's true identity, track down the revolutionary assassins, and confront the question of whether catching a dictator's pursuers truly serves justice or merely protects a monster who deserves his fate.